Good evening, everyone. Welcome to My Startup TV Africa. I am Jayasri, your host for the evening. We have a very exciting program on tonight. But first, let me tell you about the latest events and developments in the world of startups, all the way from here in Africa. I am reaching out to you from East Africa, Tanzania, from a beautiful city called Dar es Salaam. So let's start with the first news. So the first news is that African tech startup investment has dropped by 28% to $2.4 billion in 2023 for various reasons, especially as the impacts of the global capital shortage has started making itself felt on the continent. This is a very critical piece of information because Africa is right now experiencing what many experts will call as a funding winter. While the African tech space had an impressive 2022, to many would remember that it had a funding increase to beyond $3 billion for the first time ever. 2023 signified a sort of a reset. A total of 406 startups raised a combined total of $2.4 billion over the course of 2023. I'll go to the next development, which is slightly on a more cheerful note. Y Combinator, the popular American accelerator program, has picked Triply, a Kenyan fintech that helps travel businesses collect payments as one of their most promising startups. Triply is the latest African startup in the cohort of YC after Cleva, the cross-border payment service, and Midle, the API startup. Now we move on to the third news. This is very exciting. In Davos, the United Nations Development Programme has launched the Timbuktu Initiative in collaboration with African countries. The initiative, unveiled during a special session at the 24th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, aims to be the world's largest financing facility, uniting catalytic and commercial capital to bolster Africa's startup ecosystem. So these are the top 3 important news developments from Africa. Now I move to the next segment where I introduce a very special guest. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We are My Startup TV app that you can download on Google Play Store. You can also listen to our podcast on Spotify and Amazon Music, and you can also follow us on different social media channels. We are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Koo, and Twitter. Now let's go to see who our guest is for this evening. Our guest tonight is Ajay Ramasubramaniam, the CEO of Startup Réseau. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Ajay leads a company that is building a massive network that connects startups with the resources they need to thrive. Think of them as the ultimate one-stop shop for startups, from funding and mentorship to connecting them with major corporations and investors. Ajay and his team have already helped launch an impressive 244 startups through their programs, and they have even made strategic investments in 10 of them that went on to raise a whopping $14 million in additional funding. Talk about success stories in Africa. But Startup Réseau is not just focused on India or just Africa. They are working with partners across Africa, creating programs for entrepreneurs, especially women. Ajay, you're passionate about igniting the startup scene in developing economies, and we are excited to dive deeper into your work and vision for Africa. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Jayasri and My Startup TV, for having me on the show. I'm absolutely passionate about 2 things: startup, that's one, and Africa for sure, because that's where I started my career going back 20 years. So yeah, I'm glad to be here and talk about 2 things that ignite my passion.
Oh, fine. Wonderful. So let's start with your journey itself. What ignited your passions towards startups, and how come Africa happened for a company that is headquartered in Mumbai, I believe?
That's correct. So I think of everything bad, negative that would have happened during COVID, I think there are a lot of positives that came out for someone like us who is an enabler. I wouldn't call ourselves an accelerator or just a startup enabler. We see ourselves as a pacer because, like you rightly pointed out, beginning of the introduction, we work with a variety of stakeholders. And we see ourselves more as a pacer. So startups or emerging tech is at the core of everything we do. But at the same time, we work with governments, we work with universities, we work with large corporates, we run our own programs. So it's a kind of a mixed bag in terms of who our stakeholder is. But what's common to everything is entrepreneurs, is tech startups. So going to your question, we started out in India in 2019. I've been doing this for about a decade now. So before starting Startup Réseau in mid late 2019, I spent about 6 years prior to that working with a Canadian university for whom I set up a startup accelerator and early stage venture fund in India, headquartered out of Mumbai, but operating pan India. Uh, I felt that there was a lots happening in different emerging markets in the global south, but given that it was a university backed initiative, India was the mandate, or there wasn't much interest in other emerging markets in the global south. That kind of prompted me to branch out because I felt that there were a lot of things that were happening in India which could, for lack of better words, be replicated in other emerging markets. And I had this thesis, and I continue to have it, that there are several markets globally with at least one city in a country having at least a 5 to 10 million kind of a population, and that kind of a population you typically find in the UN designated global south, Southeast Asia, India, Middle East, Africa, South America. All of these regions, large geographic regions, have several countries which probably tick the box on that. Another unique feature is that many of these countries have a huge percentage of youth population. And our thesis as an organization is that a lot of economic development in these markets is going to be driven by tech entrepreneurship and by youth. So that's a potent mix. But at the same time, many of these markets are typically not markets where some of the established brands from the Western world who have been running accelerators, incubators, and the likes would kind of step foot into for a variety of reasons. But the most important one being economics, and the second one, access to talent, which can actually set up such programs and branch out into a financially sustainable model. Having been doing that for about 6 years prior to starting Startup Réseau, I had a strong conviction that this is a model that could be worked upon. Of course, India is home market, and we started out with that. But bang in the middle of COVID, going back to the good things of COVID, digital allowed us to look at several markets, attend a lot of conferences virtually, do dipstick in terms of trying to assess and identify which are the markets where there really exists potential opportunity for us to take our brand of or style of programming and do stuff. Because if you look at the entrepreneurship ecosystem, it's kind of a pyramid. So the base of the pyramid is a bigger piece, or the chunkier one, where even enabling entrepreneurship, there is an opportunity for several actors to come in. Then you slowly move up the pyramid. Then you have incubators, you have accelerators, you have venture funds, and all of that. And we'll get there. We'll get there at some point. But I think there's a huge role, even in terms of enabling that tech entrepreneurship ecosystem, workshops, boot camps, venture development programs, all of that probably that feed into either incubators, accelerators, and all of that. So during COVID, we started looking at a lot of these markets. Africa definitely was not the first market we looked at. There were earlier attempts made in Southeast Asia due to proximity, and also with a more robust or more evolving, dynamic kind of a startup ecosystem. But for a variety of reasons, it didn't kind of work out well. Language was a primary concern because many of the countries, English is not the primary language of business communication. I had spent time with my earlier organization, even being back and forth between Vietnam and India, setting up a program in Vietnam. So I thought it would be easy, but like it happens, a lot of times hypotheses get proven wrong when the rubber meets the road. So next port of call was to look at Middle East, because that again is a short flight from where we are in Mumbai. But again, for a variety of other reasons, cultural, business, and all of that, Middle East didn't pan out. So then we were like, okay, now what is the next frontier? What to look at? Like I said, 2004 when I started my career, beautiful city called Dar es Salaam, where probably you're sitting out of, on the east coast of Africa. That's where I started my career, and I always at that point felt that at some point in time in the future, when I'm 40 and beyond, without wanting to kind of disclose my age, at some point in future I would want to come back to these parts, because I definitely believe that there are huge opportunities to be tapped into in the broader African continent, and more so on the east coast or East Africa or Eastern Africa, because there are a lot of business and cultural ties as well with a market like India. So during COVID, we did a lot of these experiments. We kind of formed a lot of these friendships, attended a lot of virtual events, hosted a lot of virtual events, and that kind of kickstarted our journey in Africa. So long answer to a short question, but yeah, COVID is when we began our African expedition.
That's actually a very interesting journey of how you set up things in Africa. It also has a lead to my next question. I wanted to ask you that while building these various programs in Africa, what unique challenges you faced, other than, of course, the language barrier? What early hurdles did you have and how did you overcome things?
So no hurdles as such. No hurdles when it comes to. So look, all emerging markets, or instead, I would say that all markets have their own unique set of challenges, right? And I believe that there are two sets of people: people who have never set foot in Africa, and for different reasons they feel it's difficult probably to do something in Africa, and there are other set of people who probably have stepped foot in Africa, and I believe that anyone who has set foot in Africa, any of the country at least once, would probably kind of relate to it in a much deeper way, and would for one reason or the other be in love with that part of the world. And I belong to the latter category, and that's why I was crazy enough to dream that there is some big opportunity to go after the broader African continent. Honestly speaking, we didn't find any challenges. There was a story to tell. I lived in Tanzania for about 4 years. Very little smattering of Swahili that I can speak, which absolutely goes nowhere when it comes to building a business. But at the same time, there was a little bit of comfort. I think comfort is one of the bigger factors which pushes someone to do something or not do something. Either you're comfortable with someone or a market, or you're not comfortable. If you're not comfortable, even if the opportunity is big, you tend to kind of focus on smaller and minute points which actually don't make a big difference, and you tend to kind of get turned off. But if you're really kind of connected in one way or the other, you wouldn't look at challenges or problems. You would actually look at the positives and the opportunity. So Tanzania for us, and in the context of Africa, a lot of people would ask. I mean, if you're starting with Africa, you're looking at East Africa. Why wouldn't you look at a Nairobi? Why wouldn't you look at a Kenya as a country? For me, it was Tanzania first, Dar es Salaam first, for a simple reason that I had lived there, and I had comfort with the lay of the land, with the people. Easygoing, not in a negative way, but easygoing in terms of being able to kind of have conversations and see if there's an opportunity. So we didn't have any teething troubles. A lot of people who welcomed us with open hands. If I were to take names, someone like Jumanne, who runs Sahara Ventures, was probably one of the first guys that I interacted with. Another gentleman who formerly used to be a managing director of a leading bank in Tanzania, never met before, just over a LinkedIn, Sunday evening, 7:30 p.m. India time, just a LinkedIn hi hello exchange, and he's like, if you guys are doing anything ever over here, would be more than happy to partner with you. So there were a lot of those early conversations which gave us that confidence that okay, people are welcoming you and not looking at you as competition, because that's very easy to happen. But when people give you that comfort, you are willing to kind of put in the hard yards, because look, the business that we are in the business where we are a startup who is enabling a startup or enabling startup ecosystems, and it's important to keep passion and all of those things on one side, but also try and understand, uh, can this be built as a sustainable business longer run. A lot of folks try to make that attempt, would do one or two things, and then when they don't see how they're going to make it financially sustainable, they will just they pull the plug. It's easy to do. But we always knew as a team that if you're getting into this is a 5 year journey. Anticipate that 5 years are not going to make any money. There are definitely going to be cultural difficulties. It could be around language, it could be around time to market, it could be around competition, there could be many things. But just like horse on the street, wear those blinkers, keep those things, keep the noise aside, and focus on what you're setting out to do. And what we have set out to do is to create structured programs across the value chain or the pyramid that I spoke about, and try and create value. The moment your focus is on creating value, everyone wants to work with you, because they definitely see that. And the differentiator that we bring to the table, which has prompted a lot of people to work with us, is that while Hindsight Ventures, which is the Africa brand which we spun out of Startup Réseau, while Hindsight Ventures continues to build out programs in Africa, there is this huge umbrella which is Startup Réseau, which is running programs different parts of the world. what differentiates us compared to someone else on the continent is that we are able to bring programming on ground, but at the same time we are able to kind of connect the startups and different actors that we work with to our global network. Réseau means network in French, and that's what the business is built on. So it would be ironical if we don't tap into the network effect that we have. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of partners that we work with, I think that gives them this big cushion to work with, engaging with us, because they don't see us as competition. They see that this guy is not only, or this company is not only going to help me in market in my country, he's probably going to help me in the region, going to help us in the continent. But what's more important is the global angle that we are able to bring in, the global network that we are able to plug in. So that gives them a lot of cushion and confidence, and the open arms gives us a lot of cushion and confidence. So in that way, it's been smooth sailing for. Of course, there are, as a business, there are going to be teething troubles. You're not going to whine about that and cry about that. But when you ask the question, so far, Touchwood past, it's been about 3.5 years. I personally, as a co-founder of Hindsight Ventures and founder of Startup Réseau, I haven't seen anything which is negative or a problem or impediment to us growing. It's been all great.
Wonderful. That's very interesting to hear. I'm going to focus the next set of questions on Africa's startup ecosystem and your views on it. So my first question would be that you have built a very impressive portfolio of so many startups and programs. What are some of the key trends that you have observed in the African startup ecosystem over the years? And before you answer the question, could you just tell our audience about the websites they should visit? I mean, your company website and Hindsight Ventures both.
Yeah, so Startup Réseau is I hate calling Startup Réseau the parent organization, because I would be very wrong to do that. It is just that we carved out Hindsight Ventures very strategically, because we realized very soon into our journey in the African continent that a lot of treatment when it comes to whether it is creating programs, structures, engagements with startups. Look, technology is funny. If you look at most of Africa, it's all been technology up, right? There is Africa pre 2000 and Africa post 2000, and Africa post 2000 is pretty much just built on technology. If you look at telecommunications, so telecommunication is the backbone of any technology ecosystem. The funny part is that unlike markets like India and elsewhere, where telecommunication, if you look at the journey of telecommunication as an industry, it has got its own milestones or markers. The beauty of telecommunications in Africa has been that everything has been mobile up. There is either barely anything or nothing, which is pre-mobile, right? Which gives you a big leapfrog when it comes to telecommunications as a means of technology. The other important aspect to look at is that mobile money, whether M-Pesa or any other format of mobile money. I remember going back to 2006 when I used to live in Tanzania, when they used to play advertisements at the theater of people, a farmer sending money to his daughter in the city to study and all of that. Me and a friend of mine, it was beyond us. I mean, even coming from India, it was beyond us to kind of fathom how the hell is someone sending money on mobile? How is it even happening? So we were absolutely clueless about that. M-Pesa tried launching in India, but M-Pesa didn't go anywhere in India. So there are parts of Africa which has had a leg up on some technology, but because it's built on telecommunications as a platform or telcos as a network, it hasn't seen innovation beyond that. Let us keep that part aside. But if you look at mobile and internet, the penetration of mobile, penetration of internet, if you look at different social media networks and how they are effectively being utilized, not only for communication but even for commerce or business. 1.4 billion people. It is great to romanticize about 1.4 billion as a huge number. Everyone knows that that's the size of the population, but that's not the total audience or the TAM that you have or the SOM that you have. It's a much smaller number. Having said that, the access to mobile and internet is constantly on the rise, and that is the backbone of most of the startup ecosystems. So there are certain statistical things which allow us to dream and say that there is opportunity to do stuff. There are challenges, of course. There are challenges. it's end of the day 54, 55 countries. So even if you're successful in Kenya, does not necessarily mean you're going to be able to grow in Tanzania. If you're in Tanzania, it doesn't mean that you're going to be seamlessly expand to Uganda. So all of those things are different business challenges, and it happens almost everywhere. I mean, even in a country like India, if you're talking of the number of states that we have, if you're successful in one state, doesn't mean that you're going to be seamlessly jump to another state and expand there. It's difficult. It's not that easy. But still, there are certain sectors or certain industries where possibilities exist. So fintech is not just about banking. If you look at fintech is a horizontal, and it's almost like a lifestyle. Whether you're making payments to governments, you're consumer to consumer, consumer to business, business to consumer, there's a lot of potential for fintech innovation. And while for the longest period of time, MNOs and telcos have been at the core of fintech innovation, which continues to be like mobile money or payments. There's a lot of innovation potential which exists in the broader realm of fintech or digital financial services. I mean, look at of course, of late there has been news around Microsoft pulling off the plug from the ADC that they had in Lagos in Nigeria. But at the same time, there is the Microsoft Africa Transformation Office in Nairobi. Visa has a Africa Innovation Center which is based out of Nairobi. JPMC is setting up a huge dev center in Nairobi. So there's a lot of stuff happening in East Africa. At the same time, if you look at companies like Amazon, which have been kind of wanting to foray into Africa, starting off with South Africa. So there's a lot of international companies coming in. At the same time, there are a lot of African born companies which are also kind of doing decently well, and all of those things kind of augur well for building the broader ecosystem, because there are going to be offshoots. Maybe someone who worked for Africa's largest e-commerce company, maybe someone who worked for Africa's biggest payments company is going to probably move out and do his or her own startup at some point in time. So fintech is one major opportunity. There are significantly large number of countries which are landlocked, and if you look at retail, distribution, logistics, supply chain, whatever you want to bracket into, that presents a huge opportunity. Healthcare presents a massive opportunity, and I'm pretty much touching on areas where mobile and internet can touch upon delivering services or providing access to the end consumer. Education is another big one. So if you were to look at trends, I think it has been growing. It takes time. It takes time for variety of reasons. If people start comparing, and that's why if someone calls Africa or any part of Africa as Silicon Savannah, I mean, let us not bring silicon into everything, right? I mean, there's reason why Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. I mean, the valley is still a narrow one. The Savannah gives you a broader scope, right? So I think calling startup Savannah is a nice one. Also, startups require a lot of leg room and space to kind of run. It takes time. So Savannah gives that freedom for startups to run and take their time to grow and scale. Valley makes it kind of short. But jokes apart, I think opportunities exist. In terms of changes, the way I look at it, and me and between my co-founder Jagruti, we travel to one part of the continent at least once a quarter, spending anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. We have had team on the ground. Currently, we have two full timers in Kenya, one in Tanzania, one in Uganda. In the past, we have hired in Rwanda and Nigeria as well. But for the past 3 years, we have always had at least 2 to 3 folks who are full time working for us in Africa. Now, if you were to look at it, I think it all takes a little bit of time for the ecosystem to mature, and for a variety of reasons. It could be talent, it could be adoption, it could be willingness and ability to pay for products and services, and it's a journey. So if you expect that, if startups expect that, why am I not being written a check because someone else in other part of the world has been written a check? You need to kind of have skin in the game. You need to kind of take it easy. You need to kind of find customers who are willing to pay. Ecosystems take time to mature. But if you were to look at broader themes, the ones that I spoke about, all of them, they present a bigger opportunity because there was a missing middle. If you went back 20 years and you looked at the African continent, you either had someone who was rich and had money, or you had people who didn't have money. Unlike markets in the emerging world or developing world, where there is a huge chunk of middle class, and the middle class has multiple layers, like you peel onions and you have multiple layers. Africa was kind of missing that. But today, if you look at the Africa that is there, I think that missing middle has come into play. and you find a lot of those middle income groups, and even within the middle income probably you have two, three, four layers, and all of these guys have spending capacity, all of these guys have access to modern gadgets, access to the internet, they're seeing what's happening elsewhere, and demand gets created, consumer behavior gets created, and that's what one should bet on. And that's why there is a huge opportunity which probably is not yet realized, but if you look at a 3 to 5 year kind of a horizon, you'll see a lot of things kind of playing out. So one needs to kind of take it easy and have that patience and the holding capacity for actually seeing results and outcomes taking place.
That's fantastic. So I was coming to a question which is again naturally flowing from your response, is that Africa startup potential is a oft used cliche in a lot of like on online documents, journals, and research papers. What in your view is the potential of Africa, and how do you think that maybe corporates or the ecosystem or the bigger players can actually harness it?
Potential is always unlimited. Any potential without having the unlimited terminology is limiting itself. So the potential is unlimited, just like the human mind. Uh, but you need a lot of actors to kind of step up. I think it's difficult to point finger at one thing. So when it comes to startups and startup ecosystems, the first thing that everyone starts talking about is investments, right? If you went back 15 years or 10 years, it was the same story with India as well. Yes, startups do require investments, and you need some money to be kind of fluid and flowing around. And I know that it is missing, but there is some other form of money which is around, which is grants, development agencies kind of putting in money. There are a lot of missing pieces. Everyone is competing for the same pot of money, so it kind of becomes a bit tricky. What is missing, I feel, which needs a little bit of a shake up, is that the core of any business is not fundraising. The core of any business is to solve a business, is to solve a problem through the business or the venture that they're building. The challenge is that you need to see successes around you, or you need to see people who have been there, done that, who are able to kind of either coach you or provide you with the access to resources, to potential customers, partners, markets, whatever it is, which is the generation one of successful tech entrepreneurs. Even if you look at India, if you look at the 2013 to 2017 kind of time frame, right, which is not too far back, you still had the first, and I wouldn't just call them first generation tech entrepreneurs. First generation of tech entrepreneurs who are actually raising venture money and international money as startups, right? I mean, even before that, of course, you had tech startups in India. Even going back to 2000, you had the internet boom and bust, and that decade also saw some startups, but not the kind of startups we have seen 2010 or 2012 onwards. But 2013 to 2017, there was a lot of a Me Too kind of a phenomena where you see something in the US and try to replicate it. Someone is doing something, I also try to do that. That was happening. The bigger challenge was a lot of startups who had raised a ton of money had not yet kind of returned money to investors, because of which there was paucity of funding right at the base of the investment funnel. So early stage startups were finding it difficult to raise money, and because there was no money. But at the same time, it was stifling deal flow for someone who wanted to write a Series A and Series B check, because there was no startup which was coming through. Classic example would be someone like a Sequoia, as they were known back then, who wasn't interested in writing checks sub $2 million. They wouldn't entertain deals which were looking at raising anything below $2 million. Why did they start something like Surge, in which they are giving $250,000? Because you want to get into the game early, right? So that you can secure your deal flow and funnel at a later stage. The other big problem at that point was that the total number of accredited angel investors, local angel investors, was roughly around 300 for a country of, I think, 1.2 or 1.3 billion at that time. If you say that there are 300 accredited angel investors, it is poor, right? The challenge was that a lot of angel investors were still people who were in traditional businesses and who understood how brick and mortar works, but internet businesses were new, so funding was difficult. And also, with internet startups not being able to get profitable, leaking a lot of money, it was seen as a Ponzi scheme, for lack of better word. So not too many people are interested in writing checks to early stage companies. Now that is a big problem to solve for. One, enabling. So just like you're enabling startups, you also need to enable people who have surplus that they can invest. And invest does not mean $50,000 or $5 million. You could be investing as low as probably $5,000, but you need to nurture those individuals who probably bring certain domain expertise, business expertise to write those smaller amount checks and also engage with those startups because they understand business. The reason I say this is because a lot of early stage tech entrepreneurs in the African continent are fresh graduates or with very limited experience, and the reason they are doing a startup is because there is no other way to sustain themselves. Yes, there are a lot of people who are building businesses for the right reasons, but a lot of people go the startup way because you can participate in grants, you can participate in competitions, and over a period of time you'll figure out something or the other and something may click. That's a very common phenomenon. So that's why a lot of people also term many entrepreneurs as grantpreneurs. I mean, it is wrong, it is bad to be talking about it, but it is the matter of fact, or it is what is happening. And that is happening because a lot of people who are building for the first time have either never worked in their life or have never seen someone build a business in close quarters. So the first problem to address, even before we get to funding, is to and increasingly you see more and more people writing on LinkedIn, Medium, whatever, that there is over coaching, over mentoring. No, it is not. As long as it is done with the right intention and you're able to mentor and coach people to build businesses, is what will attract venture capital money. Even if you look at a market like Tanzania, right? Tanzania is 60 million people. It's a large market. 60 million is almost like 15 to 20 European countries put together. It is a huge market, right? But at the same time, where are the customers? If you were to look at mobile internet first kind of businesses, the customers are only in Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam is 7 million people. If you cut down the number, maybe if you look at say 20% of Dar es Salaam, 1.4 million people. That's it. That is the target market talking about. It is not attractive for VCs to write money to a startup which is targeting 1.4 million people, because what after that? Even if you onboard 100% of those customers, what after that? The business will go nowhere. So building businesses or enabling entrepreneurs to understand how to build business, how to scale business is a missing piece. But apart from that, yes, venture capital money should be there, and corporates need to participate more. We often have conversations with corporates. Yes, they do kind of sponsor events and startup challenges, and all of that is great. But I think corporates, whether through CSR or through P&L, if they participate more in terms of giving businesses to startups, I think they will be doing a fantastic service to the local startup ecosystem. They need to believe in that. They need to back a few companies. You don't see too much of that happening. DFIs do a lot, but again, there are only that many channels through which money can be distributed, or there are only that many companies that they can support and assist. So private sector participation is a massive missing piece. Business development coaching or helping companies to build ventures which can be sustainable and scale longer run, that needs a little bit of beef up as well. And local mentors. Yeah, you need to kind of find people who understand tech first businesses or mobile internet businesses and are able to kind of give time to nurture some of these entrepreneurs and help them kind of build and scale. I can talk passionately for hours, so I'll just stop it at that one for this question.
We are enjoying this conversation, no problem. So my next question would be that beyond, say, Nairobi or Lagos, which other African cities do you see as emerging as potential startup powerhouses? Whenever there is any discussion on startup and Africa, first cities that you hear are generally Nairobi and Lagos, and maybe sometime Egypt and places like that. In your opinion, what are the other big cities emerging as potential startup powerhouses? And if so, what factors are driving that growth?
No, so look, I mean, if you were to look at the next 10 to 15 years, and if you were to study, read, look up different economic development indices and other things that are put out, I think there are at least 14 cities which are expected to be mega cities, cities with more than 10 million population. Lagos and Cairo already are beyond those numbers. Dar es Salaam is close to that. Nairobi is probably halfway. But there are at least 10, 14 cities which are expected to have a population of 10 million plus by 2040. But that doesn't mean that someone waits until population hits 10 million to start doing some work there. Look, infrastructurally, there are a lot of things which have changed massively. And when I talk of infrastructure, it is mobile internet, but also beyond that. Accessibility becomes a major driving factor, whether it is roads and highways, whether it is sports, all of those things. So I think yes, the existing cities, the Cairo, if you look at Lagos, if you look at Cape Town, Nairobi, those are the usual suspect when we talk of startups and emerging tech. But I think one needs to also look at. So very recently, I was in Uganda, I was in Rwanda. I mean, even those markets, they might be small, but something like so. Let's look at a market like say Kigali. I think infrastructure is beautiful. The government is doing a fair bit to nurture or make it an economic hub of activity of sorts, and a regional hub which attracts startups not just from Africa but internationally as well. So one should also look at. Let us not look at all markets from the same lens, right? So, for example, if I were to do a startup in the oil and gas industry, uh, yes, cities like Lagos do present a huge opportunity, but at the same time, are there other cities which have a big potential or opportunity where either licenses have been given out or drilling is in place and stuff like that? So I need to be there, even if there is no tech ecosystem. I need to identify because my customer is there. It's just like if you were to look at say US and Canada. If I were doing something oil and gas and I was living in Canada, I wouldn't be living in Toronto because it makes no sense. I would be in Calgary or Edmonton in Alberta because that's where the oil and gas industry is. If I were to look at the US, likewise, I would either be in Texas or elsewhere where there is oil sands or oil and gas industry. And even if there is no tech ecosystem, it, like they say, right? I mean, you build it and they come. So you need to be like really smart, like what presents the highest opportunity for me to succeed, right? If I were doing a mobility startup, I first need to have roads in place for mobility to work. If you were to look at the BRTS, the rapid transit in Dar es Salaam, I remember submitting a tender for that in 2006. I submitted a tender for BRTS in 2006, which was retendered multiple times. Now, I think for the last 7 or 8 years, they have a rapid transit in place. But the challenge is that a lot of these mobility and infrastructure related programs and projects, they take a lot of time. So if you want to kind of really prove out something, don't think I go to Lagos, I go to Cairo. Go to a place like Kigali. Probably things might move faster. The infrastructure is fairly kind of well developed, smaller city, and to do a pilot, because that's what people want to see. I mean, whatever you're building, the first thing for any investor is to see that can you do it? Are you the team which is able to implement or execute? So identify places. I mean, one, you identify the problem statement that you're either passionate to solve about or you think that you are capable to solve. But then the pilot should be in a city which either is seamless for you to kind of implement or execute, or where you have the maximum chance to succeed for a variety of reasons. So you need to be kind of really calculative rather than just looking at big city phenomena and landing up there, because chances of you succeeding is probably a probability. There's no guarantee anyways. But the bigger the city and the more the noise, chances for you to succeed is lesser and lesser.
Okay. So tell me what makes Startup Réseau different from other players offering similar services? Your competitors, if
Yeah,
you
we're
say?
collaborators. We are here to collaborate. We are not here to compete. We are here to collaborate because what we bring to the table, I believe, is a little bit. I wouldn't say unique. There's no magic wand. No startup or no entrepreneur is going to kind of turn things around or create magic overnight. It's the same process. There is the secret sauce is that we have been doing this for 10 years. We have been doing this for 10 years in multiple markets, multiple geographies. We have seen a lot of business models evolve, pivot, shut down. So the reason why the African business was even renamed as Hindsight Ventures. Hindsight means from experience or from learning. A lot of things that we see in the African continent today, across different tech hubs, different parts of the continent, is that many of these models or businesses we have seen over the past 7 to 8 years in a market like India. The funny thing is, if you went back 15 years and someone was doing a startup in India, they would reference startups from Silicon Valley, Uber of X, Airbnb of Y, so on and so forth. Today, when you talk to several entrepreneurs in Africa, they talk about good, well recognized startups in India as a reference point, right? The reason being, a lot of these startups can probably relate more to a market like India because it is more recent as a phenomena. But at the same time, also there's a lot of similarities. The markets might be 10 years apart, but still there are a lot of similarities to find compared to the Western world, right? So that's why we called ourselves or renamed ourselves from a branding standpoint as Hindsight Ventures, because we believe that there's a lot of hindsight or a lot of learning. See, if you are able to, and it's an age-old saying, right? I mean, money saved is money earned. So for a bootstrap startup, if you are able to save 6 months of their time, because you can exactly see, visualize, and tell them that, look, if you go down this path, the chances of ABC happening is significantly high because of so and so reason. And if the individual is coachable and he or she can keep the passion aside for a moment and think logically and look at statistics and know that okay, this makes a lot of sense. I think the biggest capital that any market has, any country has, is the human capital, right? And if you're able to save time for people, if you're able to help people commit better mistakes. I wouldn't say commit no mistakes, commit better mistakes. I think it is job half done. So as Hindsight Ventures, we see ourselves more as a collaborator, bringing in a broader perspective, bringing in that hindsight, and at the same time, always open to open up our network to anyone who works with us. So that probably kind of differentiates us, not just from an ideology or a thinking perspective, but also because we have that network and we have that leverage that we have built over the years, which we can bring to partners in market and startups.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned earlier about different kind of supports that African startups require. So, other than funding, of course, and mentorship and availability of a very healthy network, what are the other things that you think could benefit different startup ecosystems that you have worked with?
Sure. There are only two things which help startup grow and succeed. Either someone writes you a check by virtue of which you're able to hire a team, build tech, do marketing, blah blah blah, all of that. That is one. Or the second one is so rather than giving a man or a woman fish to eat, if you teach them fishing, I think you'll go a long way. So we believe in that. We believe in teaching someone to fish, which means businesses at the end of the day require business. They require customers. So one of the things that we're able to do seamlessly is industry networks, right? One of the things that we do on an ongoing basis, whether in India or any of the markets, is to do constant business development and build network of CXOs and corporates, because for many of the startups, access to corporates is a big challenge. They don't know whom to reach. There is no reason why someone is going to respond to emails, because either there is no legitimacy or there is no vetting and validation and all of that. So one of the things that we are able to open up for startups participating in any of our programs is our corporate network across Africa, but beyond that, even in international markets. And corporate network comes in handy for a variety of things. It could be for mentorship, it could be for validation, it could be for proof of concept or pilot opportunities. In many cases, B2B network, which is translating into business. So that is something which is unique to us and which we do well, I believe. So yeah.
So, wrapping up, what advice would you give to aspiring young entrepreneurs looking to build a successful startup in Africa?
Keep hustling. It's not easy. It's not easy, but you need to keep at it. You can. I mean, when you talk to young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs for that matter, the common question that cuts across the continent is that why are we not able to attract funding? The first thing you need to do is to not just think about venture building or doing a startup from a funding standpoint. Your main role is to build a business which is solving a problem and customers are interested in buying your product. So the first thing that you need to do is to sellotapes and wires and all of that sticking out, build the worst possible MVP that you can, take it to potential customers to take a look at it and give you feedback, honest one, not your friend, not your parents, not your siblings, but to potential customers, whether you're building ed tech, whether you're building health tech, fintech, whatever it is, and check with people, are they willing to use this product? Will they pay a dime for whatever you built? And if you have the feedback, then find ways to find money. I mean, it's never the scenario of there being no money. It is whether someone wants to give you that money or not. But if you hustle your way in and you're able to kind of convince someone to write you a check, it is purely because you have done your homework well and you know which nerve to pinch or which nerve to touch. So for that, you need to kind of put yourself out there. So keep hustling is the only word that I'll hustle is the only word that I'll put out there, and it is constant. It is day in and day out. If you're an entrepreneur, You're hustling your way to raise your first check. You're hustling to raise your seed fund. You're hustling to raise your Series D as well.
If I could squeeze in one more question, what excites you the most about the future of startup Africa's startup ecosystem?
There are a lot of people who want to start up. So I think that itself is a, no idea is bad. No idea is bad. No idea is poor. It comes down to execution. The fact that there are a lot of people who want to start up. See, you can always, so the idea can fail, a product can kind of wind down, but just the fact that an individual is not seeking out a job and wanting to start up, and he or she is constantly ideating, wanting to do something. Sometimes you get beaten down really bad, but that is fine. It is all adding to your CV of experience, right? So I think even, I mean, doing Startup Réseau and Hindsight Ventures, what's most exciting is that you get to see so many entrepreneurs. You get to hear from so many different ideators. You get to hear from people who want to probably change the face of Earth, and all of that, and it's fun. So even as an entrepreneur, you should just, I mean, you be chin up all the time. Just the fact that you want to start up is a positive indicator. Worst case scenario, if your company goes nowhere, well, you have your degree or whatever certification you have, go back and work for a couple of years, accumulate a little bit of money, and get back to building 2 years down the line.
It's a fantastic piece of advice and a very promising view of things to come. To our viewers who are still watching this show, we request all of you to visit www.startuprazo.com and www.hindsightventures.com. Did I say that
Dot
correct,
co,
Ajay?
hindsightventures.co, and startuprazo.com.
Yes. And after that, please make sure that you are also subscribing to our channel, downloading our app from the Play Store, and following us on social media. As I mentioned earlier, you can also listen to our podcast on Spotify and Amazon Music. With that note, I am wrapping up this show. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you so much, Ajay, for being a part of our show. I wish the very best to your team at both Hindsight and Startup Réseau. We will be following your developments and stories and news. On behalf of the whole My Startup TV team, thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you,
Thank you.
viewers. Have a very good evening. Good night.